"That cider is as spoiled as the woman who bought it," the merchant said, and the whole room laughed. Sabine Aurel stood beside 32 leaking barrels, while the laughter rolled through the auction house like loose stones down a mountain. Her plain grey dress pulled tight across her broad body. Rain darkened the shoulders of her coat, and a strand of black hair clung to her tired cheek. The banker leaned close enough for only her to hear him. "A widow your size should know better than to gamble on rotten fruit. Sell me your orchard before you lose the last thing your husband left you." Sabine looked at the barrels, then at the men who had spent 3 years teaching her to feel ashamed of taking up space. She laid $18 on the table, every coin she had left, and said, "The cider is mine." No one in Alder Creek knew that the ruined shipment would soon make merchants cross 2 states to reach her door. No one knew that the lonely man watching from the back of the room carried the one secret that could save it. And Sabine did not yet know that before winter came, someone would destroy her work, frame the only man she trusted, and force her to choose between the truth and the orchard that held every memory of the life she had lost. The rain followed her home. It was a cold October rain that turned the road to black mud and covered the mountains in pale mist. Sabine drove the wagon slowly, because the barrels shifted behind her with every rut. Their iron bands were red with rust. Sour liquid leaked through the oak and ran across the wagon bed. The smell was sharp enough to sting her nose. People had come out of the auction house to watch her leave. Some had smiled with the bright interest people showed when they expected a disaster. Others had looked away, perhaps embarrassed for her, which was almost worse. Sabine kept her eyes on the road. The Aurel orchard rested in a narrow fold of the valley, where the slope protected the trees from the hardest wind. Her husband, Matthew, had called it Dawn Hollow because morning light reached the upper branches before it touched the town. There were 40 acres of apple trees, a weathered farmhouse, a barn with one sagging corner, and a cider shed that had been silent since the winter he died. 3 years earlier, Sabine had believed grief was the worst thing that could enter a house. She learned quickly that grief often brought company. Bills came first, then overdue notices, then men with smooth voices who stood in her kitchen and explained that Matthew had borrowed against the orchard during 2 poor harvests. They spoke slowly, as if widowhood had made her foolish. When she asked for the account books, they exchanged glances. When she found mistakes, they told her not to trouble herself with figures. The town made its own judgment. Sabine was too soft, too quiet, too heavy, too alone. People who had once eaten at her table began speaking to her as if she were a child. Women at church offered advice she had not asked for. Men offered prices for the orchard that would not have paid half the debt. If she refused, they called her proud. If she showed anger, they called her unstable. If she walked slowly after 10 hours of work, they called her lazy. By the time she reached the barn that afternoon, her hands were numb around the reins. She climbed down carefully. The wagon wheel had sunk deep in the mud, and there was no one to help her unload. She put 2 planks against the back of the wagon and rolled the barrels down one at a time. Each one weighed more than she did. She braced her shoulder against the wet oak, pushed with both hands, and guided it toward the barn. By the 6th barrel, her breath came in painful pulls. By the 12th, mud covered the front of her dress. By the 20th, the skin on her palms had opened beneath her gloves. She did not stop. Darkness settled before the last barrel stood inside. Sabine closed the barn doors and leaned against them, breathing the sour air. A lantern burned on a hook above her. Its flame made the barrels look like a line of bent old soldiers. "Well," she whispered, "we are either going to save each other or finish each other off." The silence did not answer. She entered the farmhouse through the kitchen. 2 apples and a heel of bread sat on the table. A blue cup waited beside the cold stove. It had been Matthew's cup. She still kept it there, though she had not used it since the morning he rode to town with a fever and collapsed before reaching the doctor. Sabine took off her wet dress, washed the blood from her hands, and wrapped them in strips of clean linen. She ate 1 apple while standing at the sink. When she looked through the window, the barn was a dark shape against the mist. The $18 had been meant for flour, lamp oil, and the next payment on the banknote. She had spent it because the spoiled cider was the only thing at the auction she understood. Before marrying Matthew, Sabine had worked in her father's small bakery in Pennsylvania. Her father made bread. Her mother made preserves, pickles, vinegar, and fruit wines. Sabine remembered glass jars glowing in the cellar and the patient bubbling of living things. She remembered her mother saying that spoilage was not always an ending. Sometimes it was a change that needed to be guided. But memory was not knowledge. Sabine had been 16 when her mother died. She knew enough to recognize that the cider was not entirely lost, but not enough to make it safe, steady, or valuable. There was one man in the valley who might. His name was Tobias Knoll. He lived above the tree line in a cabin near a place called Crow's Shoulder. Children told stories about him. They said he could walk through a blizzard without leaving tracks. They said he kept jars of strange plants and spoke to wolves. Adults laughed at those tales, then lowered their voices when they spoke his name. Tobias came to town twice a year to trade dried herbs, beeswax, smoked trout, and dark bottles of vinegar that the doctor bought without bargaining. He had once worked as a surveyor. Some said he had killed a man. Others said he had watched his family die and lost his mind. Sabine knew only that he was tall, quiet, and perhaps 50, with a face marked by weather and eyes the color of rain on stone. She had seen him at the auction. He had stood near the back wall while everyone laughed. He had not laughed with them. The next morning, Sabine packed bread, cheese, and 2 apples in a cloth. She placed a sample of the cider in a sealed jar, locked the farmhouse, and began the climb. The path above Alder Creek was steep. Frost silvered the grass, and the higher slopes smelled of pine. Sabine's boots slipped on wet stones. Her breath grew loud in the stillness. She rested when she needed to, though every pause woke an old voice in her mind. Lazy woman, heavy woman, foolish woman. She kept climbing. Near midday, she found the cabin beside a narrow meadow. It was smaller than she expected, but cared for with unusual precision. Split wood stood under a roof. Copper pans hung beside the door. Bundles of sage and yarrow dried beneath the eaves. A gray dog lifted its head from the porch but did not bark. Tobias was repairing a wooden barrel. He glanced up as Sabine crossed the meadow. "Mrs. Orrell," he said. His voice was low and calm. He did not sound surprised. "You know me? Everybody knows everybody in a valley this small. They only pretend otherwise when it suits them." Sabine stopped a few feet away. She was warm from the climb and aware of the damp hair at her neck. Most men looked at her body first and her face second. Tobias looked directly into her eyes. She held out the jar. "I bought the cider from the rail auction." "I know. Then you also know what people think of it. People in Alder Creek think noise is proof. It rarely is." He took the jar and raised it toward the light. Fine threads drifted through the cloudy amber liquid. He removed the stopper and smelled it. Then he poured a little into the wooden spoon beside him and touched it to his tongue. Sabine watched his face. "Is it poison? No. Is it ruined? For drinking as cider? Yes. For everything else? No." Hope rose so quickly that it frightened her. "Can you save it?" Tobias returned the stopper to the jar. "I can teach you what it is becoming." "That was not my question. It is my answer." Sabine's hope turned sharp. "I did not climb half a mountain for a riddle, and I did not live alone for 12 years so people could bring me their troubles and call it friendship." The dog stood and stretched. Somewhere among the pines, a raven called. Sabine looked at the silent man, then at the lunch she had carried. She set the cloth bundle on his workbench. "That is not payment," she said. "It is bread and cheese. You can eat it or feed it to your dog. I have no money. I do have 32 barrels, a barn, 2 strong hands, and no fear of work. If you know how to turn that cider into something worth selling, tell me what your time costs." For the first time, something moved behind Tobias's expression. It was not pity. It might have been respect. The cider turned because wild yeast finished its work, and air reached it during transport, he said. Now vinegar bacteria have begun to feed on what remains. If the right kind wins, you will have apple vinegar. If the wrong kind wins, you will have 32 barrels of mold and a barn no one can enter without crying. What does the right kind need? Clean wood, warmth, air, time, and attention every day. I can give it those. You will need to empty every barrel, scrub it, steam it, strain the cider, and start it again with a healthy mother. The barrels must stay warm, but not hot. You must taste them, smell them, and write down every change. Some will fail. How long? 8 weeks if the weather is kind, 12 if it is not. The bank gives me 9. Tobias studied her. Then the weather had better be kind. He walked into the cabin and returned with a covered stone jar. When he lifted the cloth, Sabine saw a pale, trembling layer floating in dark liquid. "This came from my mother's vinegar crock," he said. "It has been alive longer than either of us. What do you want for it?" "A tenth of whatever vinegar survives." Sabine considered the offer. "A tenth after the cost of bottles and transport. A tenth before. 1/12 before. And I feed you on the days you work at the orchard." Tobias's mouth nearly became a smile. 1/10 after bottles. I carry my own food. 1/10 after bottles, Sabine agreed. But if you insult my cooking, the agreement ends. That seems fair. They shook hands. His palm was rough and warm. He did not squeeze too hard to prove anything. The next morning, Tobias arrived at Dawn Hollow before sunrise, with the stone jar tied inside a padded basket. He stopped when he saw all 32 barrels lined across the barn. "You unloaded these alone?" he asked. Sabine tied on an apron. "Were you expecting the fairies to have done it?" "No, I was expecting you to have hurt yourself." "I did. The barrels are still inside." He looked down at her bandaged hands. "Pain is not proof that a method is good." "No, but sometimes it is the price of having no one nearby." His eyes shifted toward the empty farmhouse. He said nothing more. They began with hot water. Sabine lit the copper boiler, while Tobias showed her how to remove the barrel heads without splitting the staves. The first barrel smelled of sour apples and damp wood. The second held a patch of green mold and had to be dragged outside. The third had a clean, sharp smell that made Tobias nod. "This one wants to live," he said. "Then it has chosen the right farm." For 6 days, they worked from darkness to darkness. Sabine scrubbed oak until her shoulders shook. She boiled cloth, washed tools, carried water, and strained hundreds of gallons through linen. Tobias built low wooden racks and showed her how to leave space above the liquid so it could breathe. They mixed a little of the living vinegar into each good barrel, then covered the openings with clean cloth. He never told her to sit down because she was too heavy. He told her to rest when her hands became clumsy, and he rested at the same time. If she made a mistake, he explained it once and asked her to do the task again. He did not take the tool away. That small kindness unsettled her more than praise would have. On the 7th day, Sabine made rabbit stew with onions and small potatoes. They ate at the kitchen table while rain tapped the windows. Tobias sat across from Matthew's blue cup but did not touch it. "The town says you were a surveyor," Sabine said. "The town says many things." "That one true?" "Yes." "Why did you stop?" His spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "I grew tired of drawing lines that hurt people. Lines do not hurt people. The men who pay for them do." He returned to his stew. The answer had closed a door rather than opened one. Sabine did not ask again. Word of the project moved through Alder Creek within a week. Nothing traveled faster than another person's risk. Boys came to the lower fence and held their noses. Women at the general store asked Sabine whether the smell had entered her curtains. Silas Crow, the merchant who had insulted her at the auction, placed a jar of cloudy liquid on his counter and labeled it Widow Orrell's Fine Swamp Water. When Sabine entered his store for salt, 4 men were standing near the stove. Silas lifted the jar. "Care for a taste of your future, Mrs. Orrell?" he asked. The men laughed. Sabine set a sack of salt on the counter. "How much?" 12 cents. Unless you want to trade me a barrel of perfume. More laughter followed. Sabine counted out the coins. Her fingers stayed steady, but heat climbed her neck. Silas leaned forward. You know, Hiram Pike might still give you a fair price for that orchard. A woman alone has to be practical, especially a woman who tires easy. Do I look tired to you? Silas let his eyes travel over her body with lazy cruelty. You look like walking from here to the door might be a winter journey. The room became quiet enough for Sabine to hear the stove pop. She wanted to throw the salt in his face. She wanted to tell him that she woke at 4, hauled water, cut dead limbs, cleaned barrels, fed hens, balanced accounts, and worked after sunset while he stood behind a counter, polishing the same brass scale. Instead, she picked up the sack. Then you had better enjoy watching, she said. It may be the longest journey your small mind ever takes. One of the men choked on a laugh. Silas's face hardened. Sabine walked out before her courage failed. She made it to the alley beside the store before her breath broke. She stood against the wall, eyes closed, clutching the salt to her chest. Cruel words should have become lighter with practice. They did not. They simply found old wounds faster. He is a mean little man, a voice said. Sabine opened her eyes. Tobias stood at the far end of the alley, with a coil of copper tubing over one shoulder. How much did you hear? Enough. Then say what you came to say. I came to say the boiler needs a longer pipe. Not that. About me. Tobias shifted the coil. What about you? Do not pretend you never noticed. Your size? Of course I noticed. I also noticed your barrels were too close to the north wall, and your last batch was 3 degrees too cold. Which matter would you like to discuss? Sabine stared at him. You are not going to tell me I am beautiful to make me feel better. Would you believe me if I said it now? She looked away. No. Then I will not spend a true thing at the wrong time. He walked past her toward the street, leaving Sabine with a strange ache beneath her ribs. The vinegar changed slowly. At first, the barn smelled harsh and sour. Then the scent softened. Apple returned to it, deeper now, with notes of honey and old wood. A thin mother formed across the surface of each good barrel. Sabine checked the temperature morning and evening. She numbered every barrel and wrote each observation in a black ledger. Barrel 4, clear edge, strong apple scent. Barrel 9, weak mother, move closer to stove. Barrel 14, bitter taste, watch for mold. Barrel 27, rich color, steady change. Tobias taught her to trust her nose, but Sabine trusted records. Numbers had protected her when words did not. She recorded the amount of cider, every purchase, every visitor, every hour Tobias worked, and every drop lost. At night, she experimented in the kitchen. She warmed small cups of vinegar with dried apple peel, clover honey, mountain sage, and toasted oak. Some combinations tasted like medicine. One smelled like wet rope. Another made Tobias cough so hard that the gray dog left the room. Sabine laughed for the first time in months. It surprised them both. Do not insult my cooking, she reminded him. Tobias wiped his eyes. That was not cooking. That was an attack. The agreement ends. I will appeal. To whom? The dog. The gray dog lifted its head, considered them, and went back to sleep. By early November, Sabine found the balance she wanted. She blended the sharp vinegar with a smaller amount aged over toasted apple wood, then softened it with a touch of orchard honey. The result was clear amber. It tasted bright, warm, and clean, with the memory of ripe apples after the sourness faded. Tobias held the tasting cup beneath the lamp. Your mother would know this. She would tell me I used too much honey. Then she would ask for another cup. What will you call it? Sabine looked through the window at dawn settling over the bare orchard. Dawn Hollow Amber. It sounds expensive. It needs to be. They sent 3 sample bottles to Helena with a freight driver named Lewis Kent. One went to a hotel kitchen, one to a grocer who sold fine foods, and one to a woman named Lydia Ware, who supplied dining cars for the Northern Plains Railway. Sabine enclosed a short letter and a price list with each bottle. Then she waited. Waiting was harder than labor. Labor left no room for fear. Waiting invited every possible failure to sit at the table. The first answer came 10 days later. The hotel chef wanted 6 cases if Sabine could promise the same flavor in every bottle. The grocer wanted 12. Lydia Ware asked for a meeting and wrote that if the product remained consistent, she might purchase everything Sabine could make before Christmas. Sabine read the letters twice, then a third time. Tobias stood by the stove, repairing the handle of her cider press. "Say something," she told him. "You need bottles. That is all?" "Corks too, labels, crates, a reliable wagon, and you need to test every barrel before blending." Sabine lowered the letters. "Could you allow me 1 minute of joy before giving me a list?" Tobias set down the handle. His serious face softened. "You did it, Sabine." It was the first time he had used her given name. Her eyes filled so suddenly that she turned toward the window. "Not yet." "No," he said. "Not yet, but enough to breathe." She breathed. For the next 3 weeks, Dawn Hollow became a place of motion. Sabine hired Ruth Bellamy, a young mother whose husband had been injured in a logging camp, to wash bottles and cut labels. She paid Ruth a fair daily wage and served lunch at the kitchen table. 2 older boys from a nearby farm built crates after school. Tobias repaired the cider press and turned one side of the barn into a clean blending room. Sabine did not ask the bank for more money. She sold her mother's silver comb and Matthew's unused saddle to buy bottles. She made each choice with care and wrote it down. Hiram Pike visited on a pale Monday morning. The banker wore a black coat with a fur collar and clean boots that gathered mud as he crossed the orchard. He entered the barn without knocking. His gaze moved over the clean racks, the rows of bottles, and Ruth, working at the long table. "Busy little place," he said. Sabine put down the funnel in her hand. "Can I help you? I came as a courtesy. Your payment is due December 20th. Principal and interest together come to $460. My copy of the note says $412. There are late fees. The note lists no late fees." Hiram smiled as though she had made a charming mistake. "These matters can be difficult to understand." "Then you should have brought someone who understands them." Ruth lowered her face to hide a smile. The banker's eyes cooled. "You have always been a stubborn woman, Sabine. Matthew knew it. It is why he handled the business. Matthew shared the business with me. And now Matthew is gone." The words entered the barn like winter air. Sabine gripped the edge of the table. "What do you want, Hiram?" "A simple end to this trouble. Mr. Crow and 2 other investors will buy Dawn Hollow for $500 above the debt. You can take a room in town. You would be comfortable." "In which room?" He blinked. "What? You have planned the rest of my life. I wondered whether you had chosen the room." "Do not make this ugly. You walked into my barn, increased a lawful debt, spoke of my husband, and offered to take my home. I did not make it ugly." Hiram stepped closer. His voice became quiet. "You are alone out here. A woman cannot watch every door. Sometimes a barn catches fire. Sometimes a crop fails. Sometimes people discover too late that pride is expensive." Tobias appeared in the doorway behind him. "You should leave," Tobias said. Hiram turned. For one brief moment, fear crossed the banker's face. Then recognition replaced it. "Noel," he said, "I should have known there was a bad hand behind this." Tobias did not answer. Hiram looked from him to Sabine. "Ask your mountain friend what happened to the Kellam farm. Ask him where those boundary lines came from. Then decide how safe you feel with him sleeping near your property." The banker walked away. Sabine watched Tobias. His face had gone still. "What did he mean?" she asked. "He wanted to frighten you." "That is not what I asked." "I know. Then answer me." Tobias glanced at Ruth and the boys working nearby. "Not here." "Tonight, then." He looked toward the road where Hiram's buggy disappeared among the trees. "Tonight." But that night, Tobias did not come to the house. Sabine waited with 2 bowls of stew near the stove. The stew cooled. Wind moved through the orchard, shaking the bare limbs. At 9, she covered his bowl. At 10, she carried it to the pantry. She told herself she was angry because he had broken his word. She did not admit that she was afraid. The next morning, a note had been pushed beneath the kitchen door. I need 2 days. Do not leave the barn unwatched. Trust your records. There was no signature. Sabine read it until the words blurred. She wanted to trust him. That desire itself felt dangerous. All her life, people had told her she should be grateful for any kindness. A smile from a man was treated like charity. A dance invitation when she was young had often been a joke. After marriage, Matthew had loved her warmly, but protected her too much. He had met with bankers alone. He had hidden the worst debts because he wanted to spare her worry. Even love had sometimes placed her outside the door. Tobias had seemed different. Now he had left her there too. She checked every lock before bed. Near midnight, the dog began barking. Sabine woke at once. It was not Tobias's dog, but her old orchard hound, Moss, who slept beneath the porch. His bark came fast and sharp. Then the barn door slammed. Sabine pulled on her boots and coat. She took the lantern from the kitchen and ran outside. Cold rain cut across the yard. The barn stood open. One door swung in the wind. Inside, the rich apple smell had been replaced by kerosene and bitter smoke. 3 barrels lay on their sides. Amber vinegar spread across the floor in shining streams. Broken bottles covered the blending room. Someone had poured kerosene into 2 open vats and scattered grey powder across the labels. A lamp burned near a pile of straw, its flame low but dangerously close. Sabine dropped her lantern and kicked the lamp away. It shattered against the dirt, and she smothered the small flame with a wet blanket. Then she stood in the middle of the ruin, unable to move. The vinegar reached the toes of her boots. "No," she whispered. She rushed to the nearest vat, dipped a clean spoon, and smelled it. Kerosene. Lost. The second was the same. She checked the barrels. One had split against a post. One had been opened and filled with salt. The third still leaked from a broken stave. Weeks of work ran across the floor and vanished into the earth. Sabine knelt, pressing both hands against the split barrel as if she could hold it together. The oak pushed hard against her palms. Vinegar ran through her fingers. "Please," she said to no one. "Please stop." It did not stop. Ruth arrived first, carrying a rifle and wearing her husband's coat over her nightdress. 2 neighbors followed with lanterns. Together they lifted what could be saved, closed the good barrels, and moved the unbroken bottles to the farmhouse cellar. Near the rear door, Ruth found a dark wool glove. "Sabine," she said softly. The glove was large and worn. A small white patch crossed the palm, where someone had repaired it with sail thread. Sabine had watched Tobias sew that patch 3 nights earlier. Her stomach turned. One of the neighbors found a brass survey compass in the mud outside. The initials TN were scratched into the lid. No one spoke. Sabine took the compass and the glove. They felt heavier than iron. Sheriff Owen Marlowe came after sunrise. He was an honest man, though honesty had made him cautious in a town controlled by men with money. He inspected the tracks. Most had blurred in the rain, but one clear print remained beneath the eaves. It was from a mountain boot with a square nail missing near the heel. Sabine knew that print too. "When did you last see Noel?" the sheriff asked. "Yesterday afternoon. Was there trouble between you?" The banker said something about his past. Tobias promised to explain. Then he disappeared. Sheriff Marlowe looked toward the mountains. "I will ride up to his cabin. I am coming. Mrs. Orrell, you have had a long night. Sheriff, do not use my exhaustion as a reason to close a door in my face." "I am coming." They found Tobias halfway down the mountain trail. A canvas pack hung from his shoulder. Mud covered his coat. His right boot was missing a square nail near the heel. When he saw the sheriff, he stopped. When he saw Sabine, his face changed. "What happened?" he asked. Sabine held up the glove. Tobias looked at his bare left hand. "Where did you find that?" "In my barn, beside 6 weeks of work floating in kerosene." He looked toward the valley. "How much?" 5 barrels, nearly all the bottled stock. Pain moved across his face, but Sabine could not tell whether it was guilt or grief. She showed him the compass. He reached for it, then stopped before touching her hand. That was taken from my cabin. When? Yesterday. Maybe the night before. I did not notice. Your boot print is behind the barn. I have worked in your barn for weeks. It was fresh. The rain gathered on his beard. The sheriff watched without speaking. Sabine's voice broke despite her effort. Tell me where you were. At the old Kellum place. Why? Looking for something I should have given you from the beginning. What? Tobias removed the canvas pack and opened it. Inside were 2 rolled maps, a leather field book, and a packet of letters tied with string. The truth about your water, he said. Sabine stared at the papers. Hiram asked me about the Kellum farm. I know. You said he only wanted to frighten me. He did, because there was something worth fearing. Tobias lowered his eyes. Yes. The word hurt more than an excuse would have. Sheriff Marlowe took the pack. We should continue this in town. No, Sabine said. We continue it here. She faced Tobias on the narrow trail, while wet pine branches shifted above them. Did you destroy my work? No. Did you know those men wanted my water? Yes. From the first day? I suspected it. Did you help them before? His silence answered. Sabine felt something inside her give way. I thought you saw me, she said. I thought for once, a man looked at me and saw a person, not a burden or a foolish woman who needed to be managed. But you decided what I could bear. You kept the truth, and you called it help. I did not call it help. I called it cowardice. That does not make it kinder. No. Tobias did not defend himself. Somehow that made her angrier. Take your share of whatever survives, she said. Then stay away from Dawn Hollow. Sabine, do not say my name as if it still belongs safely in your mouth. The sheriff looked down. Tobias stood very still. Then he nodded once. The field book is yours, he said. So are the maps. You may hate me after you read them. Read them anyway. He walked past them down the trail. Sabine did not turn to watch him go. For 3 days, she worked without rest. 14 barrels remained good. Most of the bottles in the cellar survived. It was enough to fill the hotel and grocer orders, but not enough for Lydia Ware's full railway contract. Sabine wrote to Lydia and told the truth. There had been an act of sabotage. Production would be smaller than promised. Quality would not change. She offered to release Lydia from the agreement. The reply came by telegram the next afternoon. Quality first. Send what you have. We'll meet December 80. Sabine folded the telegram and put it in her ledger. At night, she read Tobias's field book. The entries began 13 years earlier. Tobias had been 29, working with his older brother, Elias, as surveyors for the Alder Creek Land Company. Hiram Pike's father had financed the company. Silas Crow had handled supplies. The company wanted farms along Alder Run, especially those with old water claims filed before the territory had formal maps. The Kellum family owned 80 acres upstream from Dawn Hollow. Their original claim showed a spring channel crossing the east boundary and feeding 3 lower farms. Tobias's first map recorded it correctly. The final map did not. In careful, painful entries, Tobias described what happened. Elias owed money to Hiram Pike after a failed mine investment. Hiram offered to erase the debt if the brothers moved 2 boundary stakes and marked the spring channel as seasonal runoff. Elias agreed. Tobias objected, then signed the altered map after Hiram threatened to send Elias to prison for fraud. The false map allowed the company to claim the spring. The Kellums lost their water in court. Their farm failed. Mr. Kellum died during the following winter. His wife and children left the valley. Tobias wrote that he had tried to confess, but Elias burned the first field notes and begged him to stay silent. 2 months later, Elias fell from a bridge during a storm. Hiram and Silas told Tobias that if he spoke, they would place all blame on his dead brother. Tobias left town and lived on the mountain. But he had not destroyed everything. Hidden beneath the floor of the empty Kellam house were carbon copies of the first survey, letters from Hiram, and the original measurements in Elias's hand. Together, they proved that Alder Spring naturally fed Dawn Hollow's irrigation ditch. They also showed why Hiram wanted Sabine's land. A rail company planned to build a fruit packing station in the valley. Whoever controlled Dawn Hollow controlled enough water to supply orchards on 600 dry acres beyond it. Matthew's debt was not the real prize. The water was. Sabine sat at the kitchen table until dawn, surrounded by maps and letters. Anger moved through her, but it no longer had one simple direction. Tobias had helped Hiram once. He had also carried the guilt for 13 years. He had known the danger around her and remained silent because he was ashamed. His silence had left her vulnerable. His evidence might now save her. Both things were true. That was the hardest part. She wanted him to be innocent or cruel. She wanted a clean place to set her pain. Instead, he was a man who had done wrong, suffered for it, and still failed when courage mattered most. Sabine closed the field book and went to the barn. She began again with what she could prove. Her own ledger showed every visitor and delivery. The kerosene used in the sabotage was a winter grade, sold only by Crow's store. Sabine had purchased none. Ruth remembered seeing Silas's clerk, Ben Croy, near the orchard the afternoon before the break-in. The grey powder spread across the labels was not ash. It was a fine clay used to dry printer's ink, also kept at Crow's store. Sabine visited the freight office and asked to see delivery records. The clerk refused until she reminded him that the law allowed a buyer to inspect shipments billed to her name. There she found 2 entries for bottles she had never received. They had been signed for with a rough copy of her handwriting and delivered to an empty shed owned by the bank. She visited the county recorder. Her original debt note listed $412 due. The bank's filed copy had an extra page describing late penalties and granting Hiram immediate control of the water claim after default. Sabine's signature appeared at the bottom. It was a good imitation. It was not hers. She asked the recorder for a certified copy and paid 20 cents she could not spare. Everywhere she went, men told her the same thing. There must be some mistake. These are serious accusations. You may have misunderstood. Sabine answered each sentence with a date, a receipt, or a name. On December 10th, she went to Sheriff Marlowe with a box of records. He read them in silence. "This is enough to ask questions," he said. "I have been asking questions. I need someone with a badge to ask them now. Hiram has friends in the county court. Then ask in public." "Public? The winter market is on the 18th. Lydia Ware will be there to inspect my product and sign the railway order. Merchants from Helena and Bozeman are coming. Hiram plans to call my note the next morning. He expects me to fail quietly. I do not intend to." The sheriff studied her face. "What are you planning?" "To balance my accounts." On the way home, Sabine turned her wagon toward the mountain. Snow had covered the higher trail. She left the horse at the lower meadow and walked the rest of the way. Each step sank above her ankles. Cold air burned her lungs. Halfway up, she stopped beside a pine and listened to her own breathing. She was tired. She was angry. She was still climbing. Tobias was splitting wood when she reached the cabin. The grey dog saw her first and ran across the snow, tail moving. Tobias set down the axe. He looked thinner than he had 10 days earlier. "I read the book," Sabine said. "I thought you would. You helped steal the Kellam's water." "Yes." "You were afraid for your brother." "Yes. And after he died, you were afraid for yourself." He met her eyes. "Yes. You could have told the truth at any time. I told myself the papers were gone, and my confession would only put Elias's name in the mud. Then I told myself the Kellams had already left. Then I told myself no one wanted to hear it. A coward can build a whole house out of reasons." Sabine looked at the neat cabin, the stacked wood, and the life arranged far above town. "Is that why you live here?" "At first. Later, I forgot how to live anywhere else." "Did you help me because of my water?" "No." "Did you know who broke into the barn?" I know who took my compass. Ben Croy came to my cabin pretending to trade for medicine. I left him alone while I went to the spring. I did not notice the missing things until you showed them to me. Why did you go to the Kellam farm that night? Because Hiram knew I was helping you. I understood he would come for the papers next. I should have told you before I left. I was ashamed that once you knew what I had done, you would look at me the way I look at myself. Sabine let the silence remain between them. I do not know if I trust you, she said. Tobias nodded. You should not force yourself. I did not come for permission. Why did you come? The winter market is in 8 days. I am going to expose Hiram and Silas. I need someone who can explain the maps and swear to the survey. I need your testimony, not your protection. You have it. You may be charged too. I know. You may lose your cabin, your freedom, whatever good name you have left. I know. And if you stand beside me, you do not get to choose which truth I tell. Tobias came a little closer, though he left space between them. Sabine, I have spent 13 years wishing I had been the man who told the truth. Let me be him now, even if it costs me. She wanted to touch him. She did not. Come to the orchard on the 17th, she said. We have cases to load. All right. And bring the dog. Moss misses him. Something warm and wounded passed through his eyes. All right. The winter market filled Alder Creek's meeting hall with pine garlands, lantern light, and the smell of baked bread. Farmers brought smoked meat, preserves, wool, honey, and late apples stored in straw. Snow lay deep along the street, but wagons crowded the hitching posts. Sabine arrived in her green dress, the only one she owned that had not faded. Ruth had altered the waist and pressed the skirt. Sabine's dark hair was pinned neatly beneath a small hat. She was still broad. She was still soft-faced. She still took up more room than the women who watched her enter. For once, she did not try to become smaller. Tobias walked behind her, carrying 2 cases of Dawn Hollow amber. He wore a clean black shirt and a coat without patches. The grey dog waited outside with Moss. Silence spread as they crossed the hall. Silas Crow stood behind a display of imported canned fruit. Hiram Pike spoke with 3 county officials near the stage. When he saw the cases, his expression remained pleasant, but his hand tightened around his watch chain. Sabine arranged the bottles on a white cloth. The vinegar glowed gold beneath the lanterns. She placed tasting cups beside a bowl of sliced apples and a platter of cheese dressed with honey and vinegar. At noon, Lydia Ware entered the hall. She was a small woman in her late 50s, with silver hair and a traveling coat trimmed in red. 2 hotel buyers followed her. She greeted Sabine with a firm handshake. Mrs. Orrell, I have been thinking about your vinegar since the sample arrived. I hope the journey has not improved the memory beyond what the bottle can meet. Lydia smiled. Let us find out. Sabine opened a bottle from the newest blend. Lydia smelled it, tasted a few drops, then tried it over the apple and cheese. She poured a second cup. The hotel buyers leaned closer. Clean finish, one said. Good color, said the other. Lydia set down her cup. How many cases can you supply this month? 24. I can promise 40 each month by spring. I will take the 24 at your listed price. If the next 2 shipments hold this quality, I want an exclusive dining car agreement for the northern route. The hall became very quiet. The hotel buyer from Helena stepped forward. I offered for 12 cases in writing. And 12 are reserved for you, Sabine said. I will pay 10% above the list for 6 more. The second buyer interrupted. I will pay 15. Within minutes, merchants who had ignored Sabine 3 months earlier were arguing over bottles. Ruth wrote orders, while Sabine answered questions. People crowded the table. They praised the apple scent, the color, the clean bite. Someone asked whether the recipe came from France. Sabine looked at Tobias. Pennsylvania and a mountain, she said. He almost smiled. Silas Crow pushed through the crowd. This is foolishness, he said loudly. No one knows whether that mess is safe. The woman bought spoiled cider. We all saw it. Lydia Ware turned toward him. I have supplied railway kitchens for 22 years. I know vinegar. This is excellent. You know what she told you, Silas snapped. She has no license, no proper business, and no right to sell under a debt held by the bank. That was Hiram's signal. The banker stepped onto the low stage and raised one hand. Friends, I had hoped to handle a sad matter privately. Mrs. Orrell is in default. Under the terms of her loan, the bank now holds claim to Dawn Hollow and all products made there. Any agreement signed today may be invalid. A murmur moved through the hall. Sabine felt fear rise from her stomach to her throat. It was old fear, trained by years of being dismissed. Her body wanted to step back. She stepped onto the stage instead. "Show them the note," she said. Hiram's smile tightened. "This is not the place. You made it the place. Show them." Mrs. Orrell is emotional. The strain of recent events. "Show them the note, Hiram." Sheriff Marlowe appeared beside the stage. The county recorder stood with him, holding 2 folders. Hiram's face changed. Sabine turned toward the room. Her hands trembled, so she rested them on the table where everyone could see. "My husband borrowed $300 from Alder Creek Bank," she said. "After interest and 2 missed payments, the lawful amount due is $412. I have a contract here for vinegar worth $680. By sunset, I can pay every lawful cent." Lydia raised the signed agreement. "That is correct." Applause began near the back, then spread. Hiram tried to speak, but Sabine continued. "The bank claims I owe $48 in added fees. It also claims I signed away my water rights if I missed a payment. I did not. The page carrying those terms was added after my husband's death. The signature is false." The recorder opened the first folder. "The county copy differs from Mrs. Orrell's original note," he said. "Ink and paper on the added page are newer." Voices rose around the hall. Hiram pointed at Sabine. "A widow's copy proves nothing. She could have removed a page." "Then let us discuss the water," Sabine said. Tobias carried the old maps onto the stage. Silas backed away from the crowd. Sabine unrolled the first map. 13 years ago, the Alder Creek Land Company changed a survey to steal the Kellum family's spring. That false survey moved the water outside their claim and later hid the fact that Alder Spring feeds my orchard. Hiram Pike and Silas Crow were part of that company. "Lies," Hiram said, "made by a desperate woman and a madman from the mountain." Tobias stepped forward. "I drew the false map," he said. The hall fell silent. He did not raise his voice. He told them about Elias's debt. He told them about the threat, the moved stakes, and his own signature. He did not excuse himself. He gave Sheriff Marlowe the original measurements and Hiram's letters. "I helped them," Tobias said. "I was afraid, and an innocent family paid for it. Everything Mrs. Orrell has told you is true." Hiram's face had gone gray. "A confessed fraud has no value as a witness." "Perhaps not alone," Sabine said. "That is why I brought records." Ruth placed Sabine's black ledger on the table. The freight clerk came forward with delivery sheets. Ben Croy, Silas's young clerk, stood near the door with the sheriff's deputy beside him. Ben looked ill. "Tell them," Sheriff Marlowe said. Ben stared at Silas. "Mr. Crow told me Mrs. Orrell was cheating the bank. He said we only had to frighten her. He gave me Mr. Knoll's glove and compass. Mr. Pike told me where to leave the boot print." Silas pushed toward the door. 2 farmers blocked his way. Ben's voice began to shake. "We broke the bottles and spoiled the vats. Mr. Crow said the bank would own the orchard in a week, and no one would care." "You little liar," Silas said. "The kerosene order carries your signature," Sabine replied. "So does the delivery slip for bottles charged to me and sent to the bank's shed. You planned to bottle my surviving vinegar after taking the orchard. You did not think I kept account of every bottle." People turned toward Hiram and Silas with a kind of anger that no weapon could create. It was the anger of neighbors realizing that respected men had used their trust as cover. Mrs. Kell, the schoolteacher, spoke from the front row. "You told us Sabine was too lazy to keep the farm." An orchard owner raised his voice. "You offered to buy my east field last spring. said my ditch would be dry in 2 years. Another farmer stepped forward. You raised my interest after the frost. The room filled with questions. Hiram tried to answer one, then another. His polished calm began to crack. Sheriff Marlowe climbed onto the stage. Hiram Pike, Silas Crow. I have warrants to search the bank, the store, and the land company office for records connected to fraud, forgery, and destruction of property. You will come with me while that search is made. There was no gunfire. No one threw a punch. The two men simply stood beneath the eyes of the town they had controlled for years. Their power did not vanish all at once. It drained from them slowly, one turned face at a time. Silas looked at Sabine with open hate. You think selling sour apples makes you important? Sabine looked at the man who had laughed at her body, mocked her grief, and tried to steal her home. No, she said. I think telling the truth makes you small. You did that yourself. The sheriff led them from the hall. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lydia Ware picked up the contract. Mrs. Orrell, she said, I believe we were discussing 40 cases by spring. The room laughed, but this laughter felt different. It held relief, surprise, and something that sounded like respect. Sabine returned to the table. She signed the contract. The hotel buyers increased their orders. A grocer from Bozeman offered to carry Dawn Hollow Amber in 3 stores. The county recorder accepted payment for the lawful banknote in front of witnesses and stamped it satisfied. By late afternoon, every available bottle had been sold. Sabine stood behind the empty white cloth, with $680 in signed orders, a cleared debt, and no strength left in her knees. People came to congratulate her. Some apologized. Most did not know how. They said they had always believed she was capable. They said the town had been unfair, as if the town were a separate creature, and not the sum of their own whispers. Sabine thanked them, because she was too tired to teach every person the full weight of what they had done. When the hall finally emptied, she carried the black ledger outside. Snow had begun to fall. Lanterns shone along the street. Tobias stood near the wagon, waiting beside the dogs. Sabine took 3 steps toward him and stopped. The tears came without warning. They were not gentle tears. They pulled a sound from her chest that she had held inside for 3 years. She covered her face, ashamed even then of being seen. Her shoulders shook. The ledger fell into the snow. Tobias did not rush forward. He did not tell her not to cry. He stayed where he was until she lowered her hands. I am sorry, she whispered. For what? I do not know. That made her cry harder. Tobias waited. They almost made me believe them, she said. All those years, every look, every little laugh, every time someone explained my own life to me, I thought if enough people saw me as worthless, maybe they were seeing something I could not. Snow gathered in her dark hair. But I survived them, she said. I survived Matthew dying. I survived the debt. I survived that barn floor covered in everything I had made, and I am still here. Yes, Tobias said. His own eyes shone. You are. I do not feel strong. Strength rarely feels the way stories say it does. Sometimes it feels like grief and sore hands and getting up because the work is waiting. Sabine looked at him. You did not save me. No, you taught me. You brought evidence. You told the truth. But you did not save me. You saved the orchard. I know. The words settled inside her. She bent to pick up the ledger, but Tobias reached it first. He brushed away the snow and offered it to her. She took the book. Then, after a long moment, she took his other hand. I still do not know if I trust you completely, she said. I know. You keep saying that. It is safer than pretending. Trust will take time. I have time, and I will not be your punishment. You cannot love me just because you feel guilty. Tobias's fingers closed gently around hers. I loved the way you argued over 1/12 of the vinegar before I knew whether any of it would survive. I loved the way you numbered the barrels. I loved your terrible sage mixture, though it nearly killed me. Guilt has many talents, Sabine, but it did not do those things. She looked at him through tears. You said you would not spend a true thing at the wrong time. This is the right time. Sabine leaned her forehead against his coat. He placed one arm around her, carefully, as if asking a question. She answered by stepping closer. They stood in the falling snow while the town lights dimmed one by one. The winter that followed was hard, but Dawn Hollow did not fail. The orders paid for a new barn roof, a proper stove for the vinegar room, and wages for Ruth and 3 other women. Sabine hired Ben Croy, after the court released him, in exchange for his testimony. She did not excuse what he had done. She gave him work because he had told the truth when it cost him, and because a person could be held responsible without being thrown away. Hiram Pike lost control of the bank after state examiners found forged loan papers in a locked cabinet. Silas Crow's partners bought him out of the store. The county restored the old water boundaries, and families who had lost land claims brought their own cases. Tobias accepted a reduced charge for his part in the false survey and spent 6 months repairing county roads. He also gave every dollar from his first share of vinegar to the remaining Kellam children, now grown and living in Oregon. Sabine did not ask him to do it. That mattered. He came to Dawn Hollow on Sundays when the road crew rested. At first, he slept in the small room above the cider shed. Some evenings he and Sabine spoke for hours. Other evenings, they worked in comfortable silence. When fear entered her, she said so. When shame made him hide, she made him name it. They learned that honesty was not a single brave moment in a crowded hall. It was a daily habit, often awkward and rarely easy. In March, the first warm wind moved through the valley. Snow pulled back from the roots of the apple trees. Sabine walked the orchard with a pruning knife while Tobias repaired a broken gate. "The upper field needs new trees," he said. 20 winesaps and 10 crab apples for pollination. You have already ordered them. Yesterday. Of course you have. She smiled. You sound disappointed. I was hoping to be useful. You can dig 30 holes. I regret speaking. Sabine laughed, and the sound carried through the bare branches. Tobias rested his arms on the gate. I have been thinking about rebuilding my cabin. Her smile faded slightly. On the mountain? Maybe. Or I could move the good timber down here and build a small place near the east field. Sabine studied him. Is that what you want? I want to be near you. I do not want to enter your house as if I earned it by helping. Good, because you did not. I know. But the room above the cider shed is cold. Very. And the kitchen roof leaks over the back stairs. I noticed. A person living in the farmhouse might repair it. Tobias became very still. A hired person? No. A stubborn person who carries his own food and asks for too much vinegar. He crossed the space between them slowly. Are you asking me to live with you? I am asking whether you would like to. Do not make it larger than that. It feels large. Most good things do. He touched her cheek. Sabine did not look away. Yes, he said. I would like to. Then repair the roof before the spring rain. Yes, ma'am. He kissed her beneath the apple trees. It was not the kiss of a rescuer claiming a reward. It was slow, uncertain, and warm. It belonged to 2 people who had spent years believing they were easier to love from a distance. By May, Dawn Hollow was white with blossoms. Bees moved from tree to tree, and the orchard hummed from morning until evening. New barrels filled the clean barn. Gold letters on every bottle read, Dawn Hollow Amber, made and aged by Sabine Orrell. Travelers stopped at the farm to buy it. Merchants who once passed Sabine in the street now waited on her porch with order books. She treated them fairly. She also made them wait their turn. One bright afternoon, Silas Crow appeared at the lower gate. He looked smaller without his store, his polished counter, and the men who used to laugh beside him. He held his hat in both hands. Sabine met him on the path. I need work, he said. She waited. I know the trade routes, he continued. I could sell your vinegar in 3 territories. You would not have to pay much. Do you remember the jar you placed on your counter? His face reddened. People say foolish things. People choose cruel things. I made a mistake. You broke into my barn. Ben did that. You sent him. Silas looked toward the orchard. So, There is no Christian forgiveness in you. Sabine felt the old pressure in his words. Forgive me, or you are the cruel one. Give me what I want, or prove every insult true. She no longer carried that burden. I hope you build an honest life, she said. You will not build it here. She closed the gate. That evening, Sabine stood in the barn tasting the newest vinegar. Tobias entered, carrying a small wooden box. Another order? She asked. No. A new tool? No. If that is a mouse, take it outside. He set the box on the table. Inside lay a simple silver ring shaped like two apple branches meeting. Sabine looked at it for a long time. This is not payment, Tobias said. It is not rescue. It is not an answer you owe me because I stayed. You practiced that speech. For 3 weeks. The dog was not impressed. Her eyes filled with quiet tears. What is it then? She asked. A question. Would you let me keep learning how to love you? Sabine touched the ring, but did not pick it up. There will be days when I do not believe you. Then I will tell you again. There will be days when you want to hide on the mountain. Then you may remind me, the roof still needs work. It always needs work. I know, she smiled. Yes, Tobias. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit. Outside, evening light poured across the orchard. The blossoms had begun to fall, turning the grass white beneath the trees. Ruth and the workers were laughing near the farmhouse. The dogs slept together beside the open barn door. Sabine rested her hands on the nearest barrel and felt the quiet life inside it. The cider everyone had called rotten had not returned to what it was. It had become something different. Something sharper, stronger, and more valuable, because change had been allowed to finish its work. She understood that now. She had spent years wishing she could return to the woman she had been, before Matthew died, before debt, before laughter followed her through a room. But that woman was gone. Sabine did not need to recover her. She had become someone else through pressure, patience, grief, and time. The town had called her foolish because she saw value where they saw ruin. They had called her lazy because they refused to see her labor. They had called her weak because her strength did not look the way they expected. Now her name stood on every amber bottle leaving the valley. Tobias placed his hand beside hers on the barrel, not over it. What are you thinking? He asked. Sabine listened to the bees in the orchard and the soft voices near the house. I am thinking we need 40 more barrels before autumn. Tobias sighed. I hoped you might say something romantic. She turned toward him. Stay for supper. I live here. Then stay for breakfast too. He smiled. That is better. Sabine kissed him, then closed the barn for the night. They walked toward the warm kitchen together, neither leading and neither following. Behind them, the orchard moved beneath the evening wind, rooted deep beside the water that had always belonged there. And for the first time in many years, Sabine did not feel grateful merely to be allowed a place in the world. She knew the place was hers.